This is a talk given by Reverend Mary Shaver at CSL Benicia.
So today's topic, you may have noticed a theme already, surrender. Surrender. Now this is a topic that Reverend Elizabeth chose, so I had to surrender when I heard the topic. It's like, oh, okay, first lesson. Surrender to the topic, because the topic is about Islam and the practice that we get from that, which is the surrender to prayer. So immediately, I was in form, surrendering to that divine nature, surrendering to that which has already been selected, and yet knowing that it's going to work for me. Knowing that there is something in there that works for me. So today's topic is based on the work of Sage Bennett. Her book is Wisdom Walk, 9 Practices for Creating Peace and Balance from the World's Spiritual Traditions. Now, I'm a religious scientist. I've been a religious scientist for, 35 some years, I guess. So I started young. You know, when you're open and receptive to those things. And so I am a religious scientist, and that, although, it's hardly ever one of the check boxes on the forms. Did you notice that? Where it says religion, you go, other, and then you fill in religious science. I figure if enough of us do that, it'll start to make a difference. So I'm a religious scientist, and what I know about Islam comes from book larnin'. I'm just going to say that up front. I'm not an expert on the subject. But I do know a little bit about prayer. So surrendering to that part has been very interesting. And I think it's something that comes in Islam from Muhammad's surrender. He was called, like many people are even in our day, called to speak out. He was called to proclaim. And again, kind of resisted that. So in his dream, he was called to proclaim. Again, resisted. Third time, called to proclaim. And accepted that call. And so from that, from his work, he wrote the Quran. The words flowed through him. And then he began that teaching, and people started to follow him. And this is the beginning of Islam. So one of the 5 pillars, there are 5 pillars in Islam, and one of those is prayer. The first one is to accept Allah and to declare that you are indeed a follower. The second is prayer. And so you will see, if you've ever been in a country where Islam is the primary religion, you will see mosques, minarets, and from the minarets you will hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. 5 times a day. Can you think about how often you stop to pray? I'm not sure that I could count 5 times a day. Of course, we're told also to pray without ceasing, so maybe that counts as well. But 5 times a day to surrender to prayer, to surrender whatever it is that you're doing, and make time in your life for the connection. Now, what is prayer other than connection? Connection with that divine spirit. This is what Coleman Barks writes about prayer. Prayer is a deep psychological force field to help us overcome our mole-like resistance. Anybody have mole-like resistance? To the light. Mole-like resistance to the light. Prayer is an unfolding series of motions and gestures that appear in endless variation throughout all the devotional practices of the human family. Wherever you are, in whatever religion, whatever spiritual path, there is something similar to prayer. In religious science, we call it spiritual mind treatment. And there was a time when it was only referred to as spiritual mind treatment, but then sometimes people didn't understand what that was. So oftentimes now you'll hear prayer treatment. Let's put the two together. And we have a prayer ministry. We have a prayer line. And we have practitioners who are open and willing and receptive and praying with us on certain things. So we do surrender to prayer. But do you think about the 5 times? We were in Turkey a few years ago, had the great opportunity to be in the center of Turkey. And certainly, at dawn, you hear the call. The minaret was just like where the train track is. So it was fairly close to us and is broadcast. So early in the morning, at dawn, the first prayer, right? The first prayer at dawn. And there was a time when we were, I was absolutely excited about this. We were going on a balloon ride, and we got up before dawn. So that day, we didn't hear the dawn prayer because we were already gone. But the next day, I heard the prayer at dawn. And of course, it woke me up, coming to. And I looked out the window, and here were about 100 hot air balloons going right over us. And I thought, to be present in that moment, I would have missed it had I slept through the call to prayer. So my prayer was in gratitude for this beauty surrounding us. So first prayer at dawn. How many of you wake up with a prayer on your lips? Yeah. And how does that feel to start the day with that? There is the time that we talk to God. I talk to God and I say, God, I'm doing really good today. Thank you for this day. Everything is going perfectly, wonderfully well, and it's joyful and abundant, and, I feel like I can do anything. And so stay with me, God, because I'm about to get out of bed. So that's the morning prayer. But there's also that just prayer of knowing that I have made my connection today, and I am certainly on my way. So in his book of The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes tells us, religious science is a correlation of the laws of science, opinions of philosophy, and the revelations of religion applied to human needs and the aspirations of man. He also stated that religious science is not based on any authority of established beliefs, but rather on what it can accomplish for the people who practice it. So this is how I look at prayer. What can it accomplish for me? What can I accomplish through my daily prayer? So morning prayer, noon prayer. How many of you say a prayer at noontime and over your meal? Okay, I have to admit, I go to lunch sometimes with a friend of mine who's a retired minister. And no matter who's in the crowd or what's happening, in the restaurant, we have to pray over our meal. And at first I'd be like, okay, but, other people are just eating, So it's like, okay, I'll hold your hands and I'll pray with you, but I'm keeping my eyes open so people don't think that I'm just totally crazy. And then I surrendered to that. And I said, oh, I can take this moment and absolutely be exactly who I need to be blessing this food. So morning prayer, noon prayer is another time to pray. What about mid-afternoon? If you ever get busy in the mid-afternoon, that's the third call to prayer for Muslims, mid-afternoon. Things are hectic, things are crazy. You need like another cup of coffee then, but you don't want to have a cup of coffee because then you'll be up all night. So, prayer in mid-afternoon, to stop. To take even a deep breath, to bless the traffic that you know is coming, to bless the day that's transpired so far, to make any adjustments to make that reconnection if you've gotten off of connection. And then again, prayer in the evening, when the sun is setting, when it's time to let go, to rest, to relax, surrendering to that prayer. And then the last prayer of the day, just before you go to sleep, the gratitude prayer. saying thank you for this day. And thank you for everything that's transpired today. And so the prayer of gratitude at night before bed, making that list, whether it's on paper or in your mind, the gratitude list. Okay, today I'm grateful that the dog didn't bark at the strangers. Or today I'm grateful the dog did bark at the strangers. Every little thing makes a difference. And then we do that prayer when we want the big things too, right? Like, as if there is a vending machine for us. It's like, okay, if I pray, then I will get exactly what it is that I so desire. So there's a little boy, and he's praying. His parents have taught him to pray before he goes to bed. So his mom and his grandma are there listening to his prayers, and he's praying very softly and quietly. Thank you for my family. Thank you for, the cat and the dog, and thank you for, whatever we have had happen today. And then he speaks up a little louder. He says, "And don't forget my birthday next week and the bike." And his mother says, "Well, God isn't deaf. You don't have to yell." And he says, "Yeah, but Grandma is." So we become then the fulfillers of prayer. Have you ever thought about that? Have you had an experience where you've been the answer to a prayer that somebody else did and you had no idea about it? Has that ever happened to you? That happened to me one time that I was aware of. Probably other times too, but I haven't been aware of it. I lived in San Diego at the time, and I was driving to the church to volunteer. I was the bookstore manager. And didn't have really set hours, but I was going to be there that afternoon doing some book work. And so I got this little message. This is like before we had earpieces in our ears. I got this little message that said, "You should go to the blood bank." And I said, "Okay, but I'm on my way to do this other thing. Isn't that good enough?" It's like, "You should go to the blood." Have you ever had those messages that keep getting louder and louder? And you say, okay, I'll go. So I made a slight detour and went to the blood bank, and turns out I have a universal donor type blood. So I walk in there and get checked in, all that kind of stuff, go to the little room where they take the blood. And as I'm leaving the reception area, the receptionist makes a phone call. And she says, "The blood you ordered just walked in." And I went, "Oh, how amazing. I am the answer to somebody's prayer." And I thought, how often has that happened to me and I don't know about it? How often have I been in a particular place at a particular time and I have no idea why I'm impelled or compelled to do that, but I show up. So prayer is answered in a multitude of ways. And in fact, your being here today is probably the answer to a prayer. Probably an answer to a prayer of yours or a prayer of somebody else's that you might not even know about, that you might not even know how you're going to affect. And so we surrender to that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the story of Moses. Moses ran across that burning bush. And he didn't say, "Wow, look at the burning bush. Yes, I'm going to dedicate my life to God. I'm going to speak for God." No, Moses said, "What the heck is going on here?" And he was called by God. And he said, No. You want my brother Aaron, because Aaron speaks really well, and I don't. So you want my brother Aaron. And God said, No. You're the guy. You're the guy I want. And Moses said, "No. I don't speak very well. I'm not comfortable. Aaron, you want Aaron." And God said no. So Moses accepted. Moses surrendered to that call that he'd been given. I want you to think about it for just a minute. maybe close your eyes and think about, when have I received a message? Whether it be something I've heard or thought or been compelled to do. When have I received a message that I said yes? And later found out why. And think about that. Think about a time you've surrendered to that yes, surrendered to that call. And if you're open and willing, just turn to your neighbor and take a brief moment to say what that has been for you. Either what the call was or how you noticed that it was something that was a definite call to you. And just turn to your neighbor right now and take just a minute to do that. You want to? So just take a minute to finish that up in just a second here. Okay, let's bring that to a close. And what I noticed is that, there's a lot of energy. You get some energy when you think about that. You get energy that says, yes, I surrendered, and it was a wonderful and good thing. Surrender and trust, and, it works out. It just simply works out because you are answering that call from Spirit. So there was a gentleman who was in prison, and his friend brought him a gift. He brought him a prayer rug. And the gentleman in prison said, he could have used a file, he could have used a cell phone, could have used something else. But his friend gave him a prayer rug. No file inside a cake or anything, just the prayer rug. And so he said, well, this is what I've got. I guess I'll try it out. So he started doing his prayers 5 times a day, and he started noticing the pattern on the prayer rug. And he said, huh. And so he studied that more as he was doing his prayers. He was studying the prayer rug. And as it turned out, the prayer rug pattern had the combination to how he could get the lock unlocked. So the prayer rug, focusing on that prayer rug, had that woven into it, but he wouldn't have noticed it had he not used it. It's like, do you ever receive a gift you put aside and go, well, I don't know why I got that. Don't need that. And yet there's something in there for you. There's something that would be helpful for you to know, but no. So it's through that we're able to make our escape, through prayer, through that deeper knowledge and that deeper wisdom. Prayer lends a new life to the day, binding it into the rhythm of sacred circle. Like a water wheel that ceaselessly catches water out of a stream and spills into a garden, the prayer lifts up again and again out of our preoccupations and sets us into a sacred time. The prayer empowers us to put aside 10,000 cares and realign to the unity and blessedness intrinsic to all things. This is from the book of Illuminated Prayer. So having this prayer is an important part of our lives, surrendering to that divine prayer. So what would your life be like if you surrendered to prayer 5 times a day? What would your life be like? Can you imagine that? Can you even imagine that? Or to pray without ceasing? To be in gratitude all of the time? What would your life be like? So prayers are often directed toward a deity or toward something outside of ourselves. But in science of mind, we know that there is only one, and it resides in everyone, and that includes us. And so our prayer is the scientific treatment. And as we do that, we do 5 steps. When you do 5 steps, we teach the children, God is, I am, I accept, thank you, and I let it go. So the 5th step, what's that? Let it go. That's the surrender. Surrender to the prayer. That means we let it go. We don't pick it up again and say, this prayer, don't have my bike yet. You know, that's the time when you start all over again. You start again with God is and something greater. And so I accept. I give thanks. You know, whether it's a prayer rug that I didn't really want or whether it is something that my heart so desired and I received it, I give thanks. And I let it go. I surrender to that prayer. I surrender to that divine connection. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to happen. How it happens is none of my business. That's what I release. I release it to that law. And the law says yes. And yes, and yes. The law says yes to our deep desired prayer. So anything you do every day can open into the deepest spiritual place, which is freedom. So what takes 9 months for the embryo, 40 years, 40 early mornings will do for your growing awareness. Anything you do every day can open into the deepest spiritual place, which is freedom. What 9 months does for the embryo, 40 early mornings will do for your growing awareness. Can you imagine? If you started a program today, 40 days of prayer, what would that do for your awareness? So this is what Rumi tells us. Be courageous and discipline yourself. Work. Keep digging your well. Don't think about getting off from work. Water is there somewhere. Submit to a daily practice. Your loyalty to that is a ring on the door. Keep knocking. The joy inside will eventually open a window and look out to see who's there. Be courageous and discipline yourself. Work. Keep digging your well. Don't think about getting off from work. Water is there somewhere. Submit to a daily practice. Your loyalty to that is a ring on the door. Keep knocking, and the joy inside will eventually open a window and look out to see who's there. So let us take this thought into our prayer treatment as we come into that time of knowing. The practice, the doing, the praying. So we start with knowing. We start with what is absolutely true, and that is that there's one power, one presence, one infinite source, one divine nature, one wholeness, one presence, everywhere, connected in divine wisdom. And so we right now recognize, acknowledge that divine source, one source, as our source, a source personal to each and every one, greater than we are, and yet it is so personal. It is that which loves us beyond knowing. It is that, by whatever name we call it, that has created us, that lives in us. It is that perfection, that wholeness, that completeness that we connect with in this very moment consciously. And we're always connected in all ways. And no matter who or what, we are one. And in this oneness, we speak the word. We know and accept good. And as we speak this word, we speak it for all those who have been suffering in any way, whether it be an issue of health, prosperity, relationship, creative expression. We speak our word now for that perfect health, knowing that there is a divine pattern for this wholeness. And as we are in alignment with that, there is a refreshment of each cell. Each person is filled with that divine energy, that intelligence that is held in the cells, in the genes in our bodies, and it knows exactly what to do and how to do it for the total and complete wellness. And so, if there are any aches or pains, any discomfort, any dis-ease, we now bring that into alignment with the perfect and divine pattern, with that perfect circulation in this circle of life. And if there's any place where there is an experience of lack or limitation, we simply know that this is an abundant universe, that there is more than enough, that there is a source of all good. And we step up to that banquet that has been laid before us. And we share that, knowing that as we do, that our lives are enriched, that divine energy moves through us, and as we indeed put that out in ways that are only known to us, that it returns to us multiplied, flowing, and that we experience that divine prosperity that is greater than anything we might know here. And so we speak our word about the health, the prosperity, and about relationships. So whether there is hurting, we now know that as we come into that place of divine love, there is a new wholeness, a new opening for the truth to be spoken in love, a new opening for a greater hug. And so where we have been pushed away, we draw the larger circle, encompassing those who most need our love, because we have first received that divine love. And so in this place, relationships are healed. There is a new energy of light and life, a new energy of love that moves through. And so we speak our word for that health, for that prosperity, for relationships. And we speak our word also for that divine creative expression, whether that be work in the world, whether that be a job, whether that be our art, our life. It is that divine creative expression that cannot be held back, that cannot be stopped. And so this divine creative expression moves forward in perfect and right ways, touching the people that need to be touched, bringing a wholeness and a completeness to life, and returning in divine energy that love and light and joy, that peace and wisdom. And so having spoken the word for health, for prosperity, for relationships, and for divine creative expression, I give thanks. I give thanks that this is so. I give thanks for this joyous life, for the connection, and for the wonder of it all. And giving thanks, I release this word into that law that says yes, and yes, and yes. And so we anchor this by saying together, and so it is.